name is Tim. I'm a student in the San Francisco Bay Area of the US.
Hi everyone, I'm Judy, a Malaysian living in New Zealand.
Hi, my name is Wan. I'm a student in France.
I live in the UK and I voted in General Election 15.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan selamat sejahtera. Nama saya Alireda Adha bin Baharudin, pelajar tahun 5 pengajian perubatan di Universiti Sains Malaysia, Karnataka Lingaya Education di Belkom, India.
And I was a part of the initiative to bring back postal ballots to Malaysia during the election year last year.
I was involved in the postal ballot collection efforts for the US in G14 and both the US and Canada in G15.
I would like to share my personal experience as an overseas postal voter for G15.
One of the major challenges faced as a Undi, Luar, Negara is the unrealistic expectation placed upon us to receive and return the ballot papers back to Malaysia, wherever you are in the world.
Some of the problems we faced, firstly and mainly that there's just insufficient time from receiving the ballots and having to send them back to Malaysia, which is why we brought up this initiative in the first place. The time frame designated by the Electoral Commission is just a bit hard to be fulfilled at the moment.
What happened is that my ballot arrived late, and it was basically arriving a day before the election day. I have to rush and pick up my ballot, and I went to the airport, and I gathered with a few Malaysians at the airport, and basically we were asking random Malaysians, or actually anyone that was flying to Kuala Lumpur. In the end, we found a lovely lady that was flying to Singapore, and she agreed to help bring our ballots back to Singapore. And from there on, we got some runner that helped us bring our ballot from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur.
So I received my ballot paper on the 10th of November and I had 6 working days to return it back. There is a requirement called the Borang Dua requirement. I'm not married to a Malaysian, therefore I needed to link up with a local Malaysian close enough to me who will help me to kind of sign that off for me before I could send my ballot paper back.
Pada pilihan raya yang ke-15 yang lepas, saya bersama rakan-rakan saya telah merancang untuk memastikan penghantaran undi pos kami berjalan dengan lancar dan dihantar tepat pada masanya. Apabila kami buat kiraan, kami mendapati bahawa kos penghantaran pulang undi pos paling cepat dan efisien akan melibatkan kos yang sangat mahal dan akan membebankan para pelajar. Jadi kami merancang untuk menghantar seorang wakil pulang ke Malaysia untuk membawa undi pos kerana apabila dibahagi, proses ini akan melibatkan kos yang lebih murah. Namun, kesemua para pelajar kami tiada masa untuk pulang ke Malaysia kerana sesi akademik yang sedang berlangsung.
I think what motivated many of us who volunteered is the surprising number of Malaysians who've been in North America for 10, 20, 30 years, who never really had a feasible way to vote before, and have now been very enthusiastic to participate in postal voting for the last 2 cycles. As an example, I think the last batch of ballots that we sent home in G15, I think each ballot costed on average about $130, $140 in overnight shipping costs to get from around the US and Canada to our runner who was flying home from Texas. And still we managed to collect easily more than 100 ballots. So in total that was more than $10,000 spent by 100 or so Malaysians just to get the ballots home.
And also, secondly, because the ballots are addressed to our respective zones and parliament already, it becomes impossible for Malaysians to send back these votes collectively, which might have helped because then they can opt for expedited postal services, which might have helped to reduce transaction costs and also reduce the time needed to bring those votes back to Malaysia.
There's also limited information or limited official sources of information to help us with our queries, etc. I resorted to the frequently asked question Facebook group that was run by Global Bersih as my go-to for sources of information. And I personally sent my ballot paper back to Malaysia via DHL, paying a premium price for that. But looking through what was going on within these Facebook group, I understood that working within these kind of unrealistic timelines meant that fellow Malaysians have set up various informal collection points with self-funded or crowd-funded flyers flying out back to Malaysia with these ballot papers, and then handing that over to a network of, again, informal runners on the ground who would then deliver these ballot papers to individual polling stations. That has been my personal experience.
Sementara itu, melalui grup Facebook Undi Pos yang dikendalikan oleh Global Bersih, saya mencari jika ada sesiapa berdekatan untuk menghantar Undi Pos kami. Dan Encik Dinesh Naim di Bangalore menawarkan diri untuk membantu kami pulang ke Malaysia dan pulang semula ke Bangalore pada keesokan harinya. Namun, jarak perjalanan daripada Bangalore ke Bangalore memakan masa 10 jam. Syarafi Isa, iaitu pelajar USM Kelly, telah berkorban masa dan tenaga menawarkan diri untuk pergi ke Bangalore dan menghantar sendiri undi pos kepada Encik Dinesh Naim. Sebuah kos ditanggung oleh pelajar melalui kutipan tahunan yang dikendalikan oleh Medical Society USM Kelly. Jadi di kesempatan ini, saya ingin mengucapkan terima kasih kepada Encik Dinesh Naim, para pelajar USM Kelly, Global Bersih dan semua pihak yang terlibat kerana berusaha dan berkorban untuk memastikan undi pos kami berjalan dengan lancar dan sampai tepat pada masanya.
So we had two major challenges that we had to deal with in GE15, especially in North America. The first was the confusion about what people needed to do to register for postal voting, especially for those who already used the MySPR website during GE14. The improvements that were made by the EC to streamline the process this time were definitely helpful, but there were two main groups that seemed to struggle. The first were the GE14 voters who didn't realize that they had to register again as a postal voter in GE15, and then there were also the new voters who didn't realize that there were two separate steps to register for MySPR account and postal voting, with some business days in between for processing as well. So for future elections, we think that the EC should consider sending out email notifications and deadline reminders directly to people with MySPR accounts already, on top of the standard press releases and social media outreach. The second and probably the more important challenge is that we as the volunteers, we really had no idea which Malaysians needed help getting their ballots home, where to find them, and how to find them. They either got very lucky and they found us on social media or WhatsApp groups, or for the most part they just gave up. And compared to most of the other countries that were doing postal voting, I think the US and Canada have the challenge of being very, very huge, but they're mostly empty in the middle. And even in the bigger cities, there's just a very limited amount of community organizing at the local level, which makes kind of coordinating these kinds of large-scale national efforts with other Malaysians around the country quite difficult and depended a little bit too much on luck. So we think that the EC can find a way to hopefully cooperate with grassroots efforts, either by helping to disseminate contact information of grassroots organizers directly to voters or through press releases and so on. Thank you for listening.
This whole experience gave me the feeling of that we all Malaysians in overseas, we are very united, as in a way that we all still really keen to vote for Malaysia, and we really want our vote to be back to Malaysia in time. We all come together united, and although we're all from different ethnicity, we're all different, but we come together as one. And basically, no matter who we voted, all right, but everyone understood the importance that every vote counts. We would love to have a more efficient system in the near future for the next election, I would say. We would really love to have our ballots arriving earlier, if possible, and have more better resources, as it's quite costly for us to have our postal vote to be delivered via a courier on the last minute back to Malaysia.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning to all.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Yang berusaha Puan Zoe dan Hawa, yang bahagia Datuk Muhammad Ali bin Selamat, Miss Daphne Yong, Mr. Partono Saminio, Mr. Robert Pedant, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Noazia. I'm a Commissioner at Suhakam, and on behalf of Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, Suhakam, it gives me a great pleasure to welcome all our distinguished guests and panelists to this webinar. I would like to thank each one of you for your presence to Suhakam's invitation and to your response and presence to Suhakam's invitation to join us this morning. Your presence demonstrates your strong commitment to human rights and to the right to vote. Yeah, it is a great pleasure to welcome, to convene this webinar to shed lights on issue which is very important, paramount importance to us, which is the overseas postal voting system in Malaysia. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as we embark on this discussion, we recognize the significance of Malaysian diaspora and their invaluable role in Malaysia's country's progress. The rights to vote is a fundamental pillars of the democracy, and ensuring its accessibility to every Malaysian, regardless of geographical locations, is essential. Today, we are honored to have esteemed experts, policymakers, agencies, and stakeholders joining us to explore and address the challenges surrounding the surrounding the overseas postal voting system. The highlight shared here today will play a crucial role in shaping policies and practices to enhance the inclusivity and fairness to our electoral processes. The Malaysian diaspora spread across the globe remains an integral part of our nation's identity. Their voices matter. Their ability to participate in democratic process through postal voting is a cornerstone of ensuring representation for all nations. Ladies and gentlemen, during our discussion today, I hope I encourage an open discussion to exchange ideas, experiences, and solutions. Now, let us engage in a constructive dialogue, drawing upon collective expertise to chart a course towards a more accessible and efficient overseas postal voting system. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all participants for your dedications, commitments to this important discourse. Thank you again for joining us in this webinar. Let us embark on this journey of knowledge sharing, collaboration, and innovation to pave way for a more inclusive democratic process for all Malaysians. Thank you. Now, that's, I think I will start off the discussion, and I will now share with you Suhakam's role in getting us into this discussion this morning. Now, Suhakam, as you know, we were established in 1999 through the Act 597, through an Act of Parliament. So we are the National Human Rights Institution. And under the Act, we were given four very important roles. Yeah, number one is to promote awareness of and to provide education relating to human rights. And I mean, this webinar in itself is a part of promotions and also awareness. Secondly, we advise and assist government in formulating legislation, procedures, and recommend the necessary measures to be taken. We very often when we pass the statutes, when there's gap, so we have been in consultations with government where there are many laws that have been passed or will be passed, and also amendments to various law, which must include, I think, many ways the issue of human rights. Then our third function is to recommend to the government with regard to subscription or sessions to of treaties and other international instruments in the field of human rights. And finally, our one also a very important function is to inquire into complaints regarding infringements of human rights. And we also do monitoring, regular monitoring visits to various place of detentions. Now, Suhakam's effort in election process and right to vote. Now, if I could just quickly explain to you that we have been involved in many election monitoring. We were involved in the by-election Don Galas in Kelantan in 2010. That's, I think, was probably the beginning of when we were involved in monitoring elections. We were involved in the general election, 14 general election in April 2018. We were also involved in the by-election of Sungai Kandis, Selangor in 2018, and we were involved fully in 16th Sabah state election in September 2020. Now, apart from that, we also receive complaints on, we have received 59 complaints during the 13 general elections in 2013, whereas 56 complaints were related to election procedures. We also received 7 complaints from 2015 to 23, where four of the complaints related to election procedures that fall under the jurisdiction of the Election Commission. So if a complaint comes to us and if it's not within our jurisdiction, we probably will forward it to the various institutions. But otherwise, if the complaint comes to us, we will investigate and then make various recommendations. Usually, we will write to the authorities that are involved in that particular complaint, and also advise the government on various issues, how to actually resolve or actually, how to be able to overcome those complaints. Yeah, and then as far as Suhakam is concerned, we often receive memorandum. We had a joint memorandum on the 14th general election by G25 in 2018. We also received memorandum of objection to the proposal of redelineation by the SPR, is gerrymandering by the opposition members of parliament in 2016. We also received memorandum by Parti Amanah Negara in objecting the SPR decision to cease provisions by draft electoral rolls in 2017. These are memorandums, and these are some of the things that we do. We also receive memorandum from various bodies, yeah, and institutions. And then we had one roundtable discussion on the SPR's proposed redelineation and its impact on human rights in Malaysia. That was done. And then in terms of overseas postal vote, the overseas postal vote issues have been brought to Suhakam attention in 2018, since 2018. And Suhakam has conducted an observation on the overseas postal vote issue based on the media reports. Suhakam prepared a concept paper regarding overseas postal votes issue, and that was raised by overseas postal voters during the 14 and the 15 general election. Suhakam issued a media statement on overseas postal vote issues and sent the concept paper to SPR. So that's what we have been doing since. Now, next, these are the examples of what we have done, and some of the investigations, if you want to call it, that we have done in terms of postal vote. Now, issues relating to overseas postal vote. Now, one of the main thing I think is high delivery costs of. I think just now when we were listening to the video, many of the students were complaining that it's very expensive to send their vote back to Malaysia. And the other thing is that accessibility and inclusivity of SPR's website. They also these are among the complaints that we receive, and lack of awareness is very common. I think I was an overseas student myself, and throughout my years of stay in England, I did not vote because I didn't know what to do, and where to go. So that is from my own experience, and then there is also short period of time registration period as an overseas postal voters and election campaign period. Because of the gap of the period which is too short, I think it is not only is costly when you want to post it, then we may not be able to get the votes in time by the time the election was held, and then in time for the counting of the votes. Now, accessibility of ballot papers, difficulty in receiving ballot papers on time. That is also a reason why when they start the when the government announced we're going to have a general elections, then there will be dates are being given, and if the dates are like a week or 2 weeks gap, then you probably will have difficulty in receiving the ballot papers. And then defective ballot papers, once received and there is something wrong with that ballot paper, then how can you go and send it back? You may send a defective ballot paper which may not even be accepted. And then difficulty in getting Malaysian witnesses. That is also one of the problems. If you live in a place where there's not many Malaysian, then it's very difficult for you to get those ballot papers back to Malaysia certified by certain witnesses. So these are among the issues relating to overseas postal vote system, and I hope with that. So we had our engagement. Why we are having the webinar today is because we actually had a first meeting on the 18th of July 2023 with Global Bersih. I think we had the meeting online, and then we had a second meeting on the 25th September, and the outcomes of the meeting is this webinar on overseas postal vote system, that we were hoping that this might change the policy and the law relating to overseas postal vote system, and would therefore enhance, enable a lot of us that lives overseas, because we are studying, because we are working, but that doesn't mean that we are not Malaysian. We would like to be part and parcel of our voting system. We want to participate and choose our government. So I think with that, I stop there, and I hope this very brief introduction to why we're having this webinar and the role of SWAKAM in this area will assist us in our discussion. Now, I will carry on, and we will definitely start off with our discussion. And with us today, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 distinguished speakers, and experts in this area. And I would like to call upon the first speaker to talk about the Initiative for Election Commission of Malaysia in improving the overseas postal voting system and its challenges. I would like to welcome Ms. Puan Zo Ranhawa, Member Election Commission of Malaysia. Silakan.
Thank you very much. And thank you, SWAKAM, for organizing this session. I think it's a great opportunity, as you said, to raise awareness about our postal voting system, and also to find solutions to the challenges we have. I will try to keep to the time of 15 minutes, but there's quite a lot to go through. So if I don't cover everything, please feel free to ask me as many questions as you like in the Q&A session. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think most of us are aware, but just to clear up some confusion that often arises with our overseas postal voting system, we actually have two categories of postal voters, PTH or absentee voters and 1B. These PTH voters are permanently registered as overseas postal voters on our electoral roll unless they change their status otherwise. They are full-time students overseas and their spouses, civil servants and their spouses, and police and army. For 1B, this is a category that is open to all Malaysians staying overseas. So you can apply when an election is called or for a specific election. It is not a permanent category that you are always a postal voter. So next. So I think I'll go into this quite a bit more because this is, I think, where a lot of the confusion arises when people come to be overseas postal voters. For this category of PTH, we have about over 2,700 PTH voters registered permanently as overseas postal voters. So what happens is when they go overseas, this category of postal voters might change their status to receive postal votes whenever an election is called. So they will automatically receive their postal vote. And it's important to note that these voters no longer have a polling station where they can go and vote to in an election. So it's not like they have an option once an election is called to come back to Malaysia and vote at a polling station. They will automatically be issued with a postal vote. And this is compared to 1B, to 1B, where you can apply once an election is called or before an election is called for a specific upcoming election. You can apply online to receive a postal ballot for a specific election. Okay. The issue we have with PTH voters, I would encourage any PTH voters to try to change their status back to being ordinary voters and to opt to receive a postal ballot if they through 1B if they are overseas. Because with PTH voters, we have a lot of problems with people not updating their correspondence address. So they might have applied to be an absentee voter 5 years ago, and they have never updated their address since then. They might have moved around overseas, or they might have come back to Malaysia, but they are still registered to receive an overseas voter ballot paper, for example, in the UK. And SPR has to send that ballot paper out to the UK, and they won't be able to vote in person. So what SPR does every general election, we actually have a dedicated team to try to contact every single PTH voter to ensure that their correspondence address is the correct one. However, if we aren't able to update their correspondence address, we have to send it out to the latest address we have on record. So next. Okay, this is the timeline that we have. I think we can all appreciate the 60-day period is quite challenging for all parties to fulfill our constitutional duty to conduct an election within 60 days of Parliament. So this is an example of what happened in GE 15. It was a snap election of sorts because nobody knew that Parliament was going to be dissolved that day on the 10th of October, 2022. So Parliament was dissolved and we opened the applications for postal voting on that day for 1B. So any overseas Malaysians could apply from the 10th of October until the 23rd of October 2022. So they had 13 days to apply online. It's a process that if you already have a MySPR account, takes all of 5 minutes to apply for a postal vote if you already have a MySPR account. And then we had nomination on the 5th of November. So between the 23rd and the 5th of November, what SPR does is we prepare all the envelopes and all the forms ready for the issuance of postal ballots after the nomination process. This includes coordinating with Post Malaysia to ensure that we all have all the addresses and all the postal stickers that we need on the envelopes so that they can be sent out to overseas Malaysians straight away after the issuance on the 7th of December. So once we have nomination day, we obviously can't send the ballots out before nomination day because we need the names of the candidates. We have to give the candidates 24 hours notice so that they can be present at the issuance of the postal ballots. So we started the issuance of the postal ballots at 8 a.m. on the 7th of December. We prioritize overseas postal votes at 8 a.m. on the 7th of December. And then 7th of November. And then we send them out to voters, and voters have to get them back by the 19th of November. Now, why we generally have to have a polling day that isn't the very end of the 60 days is we always need to have a bit of a buffer, which was the case in GE15. So we had polling day on the 19th of November, and unfortunately, 2 candidates in the election passed away before polling day. In fact, one passed away the morning of polling day. So we actually had to then use up the entire period we had of 60 days to fit in the elections for these two seats. So we had the elections on the 7th of December for those 2 seats, and the 60 days ended on the 9th of December. So we had basically a bit over 24 hours spare to the end of the 60 days. Okay, next. So I think for most of these challenges, I will go through a bit later, but for the first issue that we have is for this short application period. One of the main problems that overseas voters have is they haven't opened a My SPR account yet. And that process needs verification by SPR. So it can take up to 1 day during an election period, maybe maximum up to 2 days to verify a person's account. So we encourage all all overseas Malaysians, in fact, all Malaysians, even if you're in Malaysia, to open a My SPR account now. That way, it is very easy in the future for you to have transactions with SPR whenever you need to. But the cost of sending your ballots back, I think it is as frustrating for me as it is for overseas Malaysians to hear of the challenges of sending your ballots back. But under the regulations, we have SPR bears the cost of sending the ballots to the voter, and the voter can choose whichever means they find necessary to send the ballot back. For example, in G15, a lot of voters used runners to send their ballots back, I think in part because of the great effort by NGOs like Global Bersih. So next. Okay, so here are some of the improvements that we've made in the last 10 years. We first started opening up postal voting to more categories of Malaysians in 2013. At that time, voters could only collect their ballots at the consulates or embassies, which meant that voters had to travel quite far distances at high cost to themselves to get to the embassies. And then they could either post the ballots back themselves or leave it with the embassy for them to send back. Then in 2018, we moved to a system where the postal ballots would be directly sent to the individual voter. So the voters no longer had to travel long distances to get to their embassies or consulates. But this process was done manually, and we also had conditions on who could be a overseas postal voter and who couldn't. So in 2022, last year, we abolished the additional conditions so that anyone who was living overseas as a Malaysian could register as a postal voter. They didn't need to have come back to Malaysia for a certain time period in the last 5 years. It was open to anybody. And it was also open to Malaysians that were living in the border regions around Malaysia, such as Singapore, Kalimantan, Southern Thailand, Brunei. And we created this new online system. So all 1B overseas postal voters could apply through this secure and accessible and efficient system. Unlike in GE14, where it was either by email or by fax, and voters might not know if their application had been approved or rejected. Now this online system basically allows any overseas voter to check the progress of their transaction and their application with SPR. Okay, next. I think I've done this next, please. Okay, so another improvement, I think, is the way that we now we issue postal voters to ensure that we are basically making use of every single second that we have available to us from nomination day until we hand it over to the courier, and for the courier to deliver the postal votes as quickly as possible. So we have 1 day to print the postal vote. In fact, this happens throughout the night of the Saturday. So nomination is normally held on a Saturday. And then throughout that Saturday night, all the ballot papers are being printed, especially prioritizing overseas postal ballots first. and then they are delivered to their respective returning officers. So that's throughout the country. All the ballot papers will be delivered throughout Sunday to the returning officers for issuance. Obviously, we have to give the candidates 24 hours notice. So that also happens on the Sunday, or even sometimes on the Saturday itself. And they are given notice in G14. It was 8 a.m. on the Monday morning. Once the ballots are issued, they are then handed over to Post Malaysia, where Post Malaysia then hands it over to the international couriers, and the international couriers send them out to the rest of the world. It normally takes, I would say, 4 days maximum to get the ballots out without any delays or hiccups in the process. Next, please. Okay, so another improvement we've made is to change the color of overseas postal voter envelopes so they can be prioritized compared to domestic voters, so that all ROs, Post Malaysia, DHL know that these white envelopes are basically the highest priority of mail in the country at that point in time. And I think the private courier companies and Post Malaysia have done an excellent job in identifying the urgency and the priority of these ballots to get sent out all over the world. Next, I think I've covered the challenges. So like, I think the video just now correctly raised a number of issues, and one of them was awareness. So one thing I think we need to really encourage all overseas voters to do is to open a My SPR account now. Even if you may or may not be planning to vote by overseas mail in the future, at least once you open an account now, you have the option to easily apply within 5 minutes after the application's open once an election is called. Information can be found on the SPR website or the Wisma Putra websites or your respective embassies. And again, what I mentioned about PTH voters, if they can really make sure that they have up-to-date correspondence addresses, or if they have returned to Malaysia, please update your status to become an ordinary voter so you can vote in person on polling day itself. Next. Another thing that SPR has started to do is really make use of social media. I think a lot of overseas Malaysians know our director of our academy, Hassanul's face quite well. He does a lot of videos, and also our APR team do a lot of videos to try to raise awareness on things like how to fill out Form 2, how to send your postal ballot back, and how to apply for a postal ballot. And we also work closely with KLN throughout the time period. So I think that's it. As I say, I've tried to cover as much as I can in the time I've been given, but please feel free to ask me any questions after this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, you are still within time, and I'm glad that things were made a little bit clearer, but I'm sure a lot have I have a lot of questions in mind, and please keep your questions in the Q&A box and we will read them later. Now, I would like now to call upon Yang Berbahagia Datuk Muhammad Ali bin Slamat, Under Secretary, Department of Protocol and Consular, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Malaysia, and to talk about the role of Ministry of Foreign Affairs Malaysia towards Malaysian diaspora regarding the right to vote. Silakan, Yang Berbahagia Datuk.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, salam Malaysia Madani kepada yang berbahagia host Profesor Datuk Nur Aziah Muhammad Awal dan juga panel-panel yang dihormati sekalian. Pertamanya, saya ingin mengucapkan jutaan terima kasih kepada pihak Suhakam kerana memberi peluang kepada pihak Kementerian Luar Negeri Wisma Putra untuk bersama-sama berkongsi idea dan memberikan pandangan dalam webinar kita pada hari ini. Untuk makluman semua, Kementerian Luar Negeri Wisma Putra pada masa ini mempunyai sebanyak 106 perwakilan diplomatik di luar negeri yang bertempat di sebanyak 86 buah negara. So, peranan kami dalam isu ini adalah amat penting dari segi penyebaran maklumat bagi meningkatkan kesedaran yang diperlukan oleh rakyat Malaysia yang menetap di luar negeri. Mengikut statistik dilaporkan sebanyak 1.86 juta rakyat Malaysia yang sedang menetap di luar negeri, sama ada bekerja atau belajar atau sebagainya. Namun demikian, dari segi statistik yang kami ada, sehingga kini hanyalah seramai 336,030 rakyat Malaysian diaspora yang mendaftar dengan semua kedutaan kita di luar negeri. Jadi saya ingin mengambil peluang ini kepada Malaysian diaspora yang ada di luar sana, perlulah mereka mendaftarkan diri dengan kedutaan kita supaya penyebaran maklumat mengenai pilihan raya ini dapat dilakukan dengan lebih efektif lagi. Perlu saya tekankan di sini bahawa peranan Kementerian Luar Negeri melalui kedutaan kita di luar negara adalah amat penting dalam membantu pihak Suruhanjaya Pilihan Raya meningkatkan kesedaran awam mengenai pentingnya hal-hal pilihan raya ini. So dengan ini kita boleh menyuburkan lagi proses demokrasi dan proses hak mengundi yang perlu dilakukan oleh rakyat kita di luar negara. Mengenai peranan kita di luar negara, selain daripada mengadakan kerjasama, hubungan yang rapat dengan agensi dan kementerian di negara penempatan, perwakilan kita di luar negeri juga menjalin hubungan akrab dengan diaspora Malaysia di negara penempatan dengan memastikan maklumat-maklumat penting yang berkaitan dengan kepentingan serta hak rakyat Malaysia disampaikan dengan sewajarnya. Ini adalah termasuk pemakluman berkenaan tarikh-tarikh penting pilihan raya, maklumat terkini berkenaan penambahbaikan sistem undi pos dan cara mendaftar sebagai pemilih secara atas talian. Namun begitu, Kementerian Luar Negeri hanyalah berperanan penting dengan menyampaikan maklumat sahaja. Keputusan-keputusan dasar dan masalah-masalah teknikal haruslah ditangani oleh pihak SPR. Penyaluran maklumat kepada 106 perwakilan Malaysia di luar negara di 86 buah negara adalah sangat bergantung kepada beberapa faktor. Yang pertama, ketersediaan maklumat yang disalurkan daripada SPR kepada kementerian ini. Yang kedua, tempoh pemakluman yang diterima kementerian daripada pihak SPR. Dan yang ketiga, tempoh pengemasskanian maklumat daftar pemilih yang diberikan SPR kepada diaspora. Kebiasaannya kurang dari 2 minggu. Jadi langkah-langkah yang telah pihak Kementerian Luar Negeri Wisma Putra ambil setakat ini adalah mengadakan program-program dengan semua rakyat Malaysia di luar negeri melalui program-program kedutaan yang dipanggil program Majlis Ramah Mesra atau aktiviti-aktiviti yang bersifat sosial di semua kedutaan kita. Pada kebiasaannya, pihak kedutaan akan menganjurkan majlis-majlis ramah mesra seperti sambutan Hari Raya, majlis Hari Sukan Negara, majlis resepsi Hari Kebangsaan, majlis resepsi Hari Malaysia dan yang lain-lain aktiviti yang berbentuk sosial. Jadi kita gunakan platform dan forum yang kita ada melalui aktiviti-aktiviti ini untuk mengadakan libat urus dengan diaspora Malaysia dan menyampaikan maklumat yang terkini yang kita perolehi dari pihak SPR dari semasa ke semasa. So di luar negara, terdapat beberapa saluran komunikasi yang aktif antara perwakilan kita di sana dan diaspora Malaysia, iaitu termasuk Persatuan Ahli Perniagaan Malaysia, Persatuan Pelajar Malaysia ataupun Persatuan Rakyat Malaysia. semasa saya bertugas di Kuwait sebagai duta besar, saya ada menjalankan hubungan rapat dengan MAK, Malaysian Association of Kuwait. Kita adakan aktiviti-aktiviti berkala yang bersifat sukan, yang bersifat keagamaan, sambutan hari-hari penting yang disambut di Malaysia. Jadi kita gunakan majlis ramah mesra dan aktiviti-aktiviti di perwakilan kita untuk menyebarluaskan maklumat-maklumat terkini mengenai pilihan raya. Salah satu medium yang kita gunakan untuk memberi atau menyebarkan maklumat adalah menggunakan grup WhatsApp yang kita ada di antara kedutaan dan juga rakyat Malaysia. So grup WhatsApp ni adalah lebih cepat, lebih mudah dan amat berkesan sekali untuk menyampaikan maklumat. Dan kita juga mengarahkan supaya kedutaan-kedutaan kita di luar negeri sentiasa mengemaskinikan laman web perwakilan dan media sosial perwakilan supaya ia sentiasa terkini dengan maklumat-maklumat yang disediakan oleh pihak SPR. Oleh kerana terdapat aduan mengenai status website kita ni, kita telah bekerjasama dengan pihak SPR supaya pihak SPR menyediakan informasi kit mengenai maklumat-maklumat pilihan raya. Kit promosi ini saya rasa lebih penting, lebih sesuai kerana ia sesuai dengan keadaan semasa dengan teknologi terkini. So dengan adanya kit promosi ini, kita berharap pihak SPR dapat wujudkan dan kita akan sebarkan kit promosi mengenai apa jua maklumat-maklumat pilihan raya melalui portal-portal yang kita ada melalui rangkaian 106 perwakilan Malaysia di luar negeri di 86 buah negara. Dan juga apa yang kita boleh buat adalah kita menyampaikan link-link yang tertentu yang disediakan oleh pihak SPR melalui program informasi sosial media, infografik dan sebagainya. Dan kita akan sediakan link-link tersebut di portal kedutaan kita supaya ia dapat mudah diakses oleh rakyat kita di luar negara. Jadi secara ringkasnya, kita Kementerian Luar Negeri dan kedutaan kita di luar negeri memberikan komitmen untuk menyampaikan apa jua maklumat yang diperlukan daripada SPR kepada rakyat Malaysia di luar negeri. Saya rasa sekadar itu saja peranan kita, peranan duta-duta kita di luar negeri bagi memastikan supaya maklumat terkini mengenai pilihan raya dan juga usaha-usaha penambahbaikan undi pos dan sebagainya dapat disampaikan secara berkesan. Saya ingin meminta maaf selepas ini saya ada mesyuarat jam 11 pagi. Saya terpaksa beredar daripada sesi webinar ini jam 11 pagi. Sekiranya ada soalan-soalan berbangkit, kami sedia menjawab. Silalah tulis email kepada kami atau seluruh rangkaian kedutaan kita atau malaka kita di luar negeri. Sekian, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Terima kasih Datuk. Jika boleh Datuk sekejap, kalau jika ada beberapa perkara yang mungkin kita minta Datuk terangkan. Boleh Datuk ya, sebelum pukul 11. Jadi we were talking about baru-baru ni kita kan sudah ada pindaan perlembagaan di mana bawah 18 tahun dah boleh mengundi. Dan dari segi itu kita nak tahu jugalah apa inisiatif. Tadi Datuk dah terangkan jugalah. Tapi kalau macam 18 tahun, sekarang ini pelajar yang dihantar ke luar negara misalnya berumur 18 tahun ke atas dan mereka dah boleh mengundi. Jadi apa inisiatifnya? Siapa yang nak maklumkan kepada para pelajar kita yang baru nak pergi buat A-level dan sebagainya tu? Dia macam baru-baru ni mereka masa kita pilihan raya ke-15 dan juga pilihan raya yang untuk negeri yang kita baru buat. Masa tu pelajar baru nak pergi ke luar negara. Dan macam mana proses itu? Bagaimana kedutaan-kedutaan kita dapat memaklumkan kepada mereka? Mereka ada hak untuk mengundi. Dan bagaimanakah cara pengundian yang dapat dilaksanakan?
Baik Prof, terima kasih atas soalan itu. Dan soalan itu adalah amat relevan pada masa ini. Saya cadangkan supaya sebelum pelajar-pelajar kita keluar negara yang mana akan mencapai umur 18 tahun, pihak penaja pelajar-pelajar ini, terutamanya Mara, JPA, Petronas, Maybank, Bank Negara, perlulah peka supaya mengadakan sesi ceramah yang kami boleh dijemput untuk mengadakan ceramah untuk memberi pendedahan tentang isu-isu konsular. Isu-isu konsular ini bukan sahaja melibatkan isu pilihan raya, ia juga melibatkan isu-isu bagaimana kita menghormati undang-undang negara yang kita akan pergi, apakah keperluan visa dan sebagainya, travel advisory dan sebagainya. Jadi salah satu cara yang kita boleh adakan adalah dengan bekerjasama dengan pihak penaja pelajar tersebut, bersama-sama pihak SPR, kita adakan satu sesi penerangan tentang Undi 18 ni kalau boleh. Yang keduanya, sekiranya pelajar tersebut sudah berada di luar negara, setiap ataupun dalam organisasi perwakilan diplomatik kita di luar negara, ada satu unit dinamakan Education Malaysia ataupun pegawai-pegawai penaja seperti WJPA, Mara, Bank Negara dan sebagainya. Pelajar-pelajar tersebut boleh merujuk kepada Education Attaché di kedutaan kita di luar negeri dan dapatkan maklumat daripada pihak duta kita ataupun secara terus daripada pihak SPR. Dengan teknologi terkini, saya tak rasa ada masalah untuk mendapatkan maklumat terkini mengenai Undi 18. Yang hanya kita perlukan adalah usaha pihak pelajar tersebut untuk mencari maklumat. Sama ada dari maklumat daripada pihak Education Attaché, daripada pihak kedutaan kita atau pihak SPR seterusnya melalui teknologi terkini secara WhatsApp, secara email dan sebagainya. Saya rasa itulah dua pendekatan yang kita boleh lakukan untuk menangani masalah ataupun persoalan yang ditimbulkan tadi. Boleh ya, Prof?
Terima kasih, Datuk. Sebab saya rasa perkara ini sangat penting. It's very important for our students and also parents to be informed that they have a right to vote, and therefore before they leave the country to further their studies abroad throughout the world, they can be anywhere in this world. So I think our student attaché has a role to play to explain to them that they have a right to vote and where they should be voting and how they can do this. And the other thing, I think our education attaché in all the countries where we have students should play a role. Yeah. Ada satu lagi soalan, Datuk. Apa pandangan Datuk sekiranya sampul undi pos hanya perlu pos ke kedutaan negara masing-masing dan pihak kedutaan jadi wakil SPR untuk kira ballot dan update kepada SPR di Malaysia. Tak perlu bazir kos dan masa untuk ballot sampai ke Malaysia. I think macam di London tu kita ada MSD dan mungkin pelajar-pelajar kita boleh turun from all over England, Ireland dan Scotland itu pergi mengundi di MSD dan kemudiannya pihak kedutaan lah yang menguruskan proses itu. Apa pandangan Datuk?
Ya, terima kasih, Prof. Pada semasa PRU 13, sistem yang kita buat adalah semua pengundi berdaftar, undi pos, mendaftar di kedutaan, iaitu kedutaan yang bertempat di ibu negara penempatan tersebut. Semasa saya di Taipei, saya pernah bertugas di Taiwan, saya merupakan returning officer semasa PRU 13. Taiwan ni walaupun kecil, tapi perjalanan yang diambil daripada selatan Taiwan di Kaohsiung ke Taipei untuk mengundi juga kosnya amat membebankan. Jadi bila kita buat secara berpusat di kedutaan kita, ada juga yang mengandung yang kos untuk travelling cost daripada tempat mereka berada ke kedutaan adalah amat tinggi. Bayangkan kalaulah kita membuat pusat pengundian secara berpusat di Moskow, di Rusia, negara yang amat besar. Bagaimana student kita yang berada jauh daripada Moskow untuk travel dan membuat undian itu di kedutaan. Jadi Kementerian Luar Negeri tidak diperuntukkan dengan bajet yang khusus untuk apa juga program kesedaran ke atau program-program untuk menghantar kertas undi. So jadi kekangan yang kami ada adalah bajet. Kalau kita nak minta kedutaan kita menghantar sampul surat undi itu ke setiap pengundi pos, ia adalah amat membebankan dan saya rasa pihak SPR harus memikirkan cara yang lebih inovatif untuk mengatasi masalah ini. Sekian, Prof. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih, Datuk. kita dimaklumkan Datuk memang perlu pergi menghadiri mesyuarat, dan kita harap apa-apa soalan lagi bolehlah diajukan dalam box ya, dalam Q&A box, and we will pass it on to bagi Datuk untuk memberi jawapan secara bertulis.
Terima
Okey.
kasih, Prof.
Ya, terima kasih Datuk. Now we will move on to our next speaker. I would like to call upon Mr. Fin Yong, President of Global Bersih, and to talk about issues and recommendations for improving overseas postal voting system. Silakan. You're mute. Please switch. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. Yes, so thank you so much, Professor, and also a big thank you to SACAM for organizing this webinar, bringing together such key players as KLN and the EC, as well as the best practices from New Zealand and Indonesia. I think it's very encouraging to hear that SACAM is taking this issue so seriously, and also for emphasizing the importance of the diaspora. I think several of the challenges have already been raised, and I'd just like to maybe just bring them all together. So next slide, please. First of all, I think it's also very clear from the video that overseas Malaysians really care. And they really care about what happens to Malaysia and what direction it's going in. And so they really want to vote. And we see that this is across the board, from the students all the way up to people who have been there, like myself, living overseas for over 30 years. It's partly because we know that the right to vote has not been guaranteed. We were only able to vote from 2013 onwards. So in fact, I was only able personally to exercise my right to vote in GE14 because my ballot papers in GE13 were spoiled. I think this is really evidenced by the huge mobilization for GE14 and 15, how people got together and volunteered and really invested huge amount of time and resources in collecting votes and getting them delivered. Then lastly, we see that especially in G15 with the Undi 18, that the younger voters were incredibly motivated to exercise votes for the first time. And they were very involved also in ballot collection all over in different countries. Again, it's also, we also evidenced by the huge increase also in registered overseas voters, increase of 600%, which again shows the motivation of voters actually who want to really register overseas. Thank you. Next slide, please. So yes, why is it important for overseas voters to be able effectively to exercise the right to vote? I think SACAM has clearly set out the fact that all Malaysian citizens have the right to vote, and there should be no discrimination because of the geographical location. Secondly, the number of overseas voters is bound to grow. Of course, the overall voter population has increased because of Undi 18, as well as automatic voter registration. Zoe's mentioned the extension to Malaysians living in neighboring countries of eligibility to vote, and also the removal of the requirement to have spent 30 days over the past 5 years. So all these factors will inevitably increase the number of overseas voters. And lastly, and very importantly also, we have to engage overseas Malaysians, because overseas Malaysians do play a big role in the country. They send remittances, they invest, they create business and professional ties. Also, you want to reduce the brain drain and encourage Malaysians, especially the younger ones, to return to Malaysia. And this is a very motivated voter category that EC obviously wants to encourage. So for all these reasons, it's really important to engage overseas Malaysians and make sure that, by giving them really the effective right to vote and have a say in the direction of the country. Next slide, please. So I think it's already been mentioned that the voting procedures have changed between GE13, 14, and 15. And after GE14, because of the challenges that were seen by overseas voters, Global Bersih did a big survey, a worldwide survey of overseas Malaysians on the experiences of voting and what they would like to see as reforms. And we came out with a report in 2019. So we're very happy that several recommendations have already been implemented, and we thank EC and all the other agencies who were involved in implementing these recommendations, including the ones that I've already mentioned previously. Next slide, please. But having said that, there still remain a lot of challenges. So firstly, and I think very fundamentally, there is no guaranteed right to be able to vote from overseas. And this is totally subject to the discretion of the EC in gazetting this procedure for every single election. So as we've seen, in fact, there was no possibility at all till 2013. And who can say, in the future, if again, this category of overseas voters is forgotten and does not get a procedure to be able to vote from overseas. So it's extremely important that somehow this right is enshrined permanently in legislation. The second issue is that there's no predictability as to the procedure. So this leads to a high degree of confusion. For instance, there was an elderly couple who drove for 3 hours to Paris, thinking that they could vote at the embassy because they remembered from the last in 2013 that they could vote at the embassy. So this creates huge confusion, and also there's a lot of outdated information out there on all websites. I'm afraid, a lot of different websites have very outdated information, and this is due to the ever-changing voting procedure. So there should be some basic procedure set out in regulations so that there's predictability and transparency. And we understand, of course, that the voting process is at the moment being improved, which is a great thing. But once it's been established, there should be consistency to be able to ensure some predictability for overseas voters. Next slide, please. Secondly, this has been alluded to already. There's a huge problem of insufficient dissemination of accurate and timely information. So it's we've seen, with social media, and even though social media is a great tool for disseminating information, it also is a tool for confusion, and there is also a proliferation of erroneous and outdated information. Unfortunately, also sometimes on official websites, like certain embassy websites, even SPR, I think there was some details that were not entirely updated. So voters in the end have to resort to self-help and run their own information networks and platforms like the Global Bersih platform. So we would like to recommend that the EC more clearly communicates and signposts information for overseas voters on their websites and elsewhere. We do appreciate that the improvements that have been made in social media and through the academy, but certainly I think more can be done. Secondly, in terms of the Malaysian foreign missions, it's very encouraging that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Wisma Putra are willing to support the dissemination of information. However, we have seen that embassies often are not clear on their mandate, what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. So I think that is one very important point. Secondly, they lack timely and accurate information. I think it's obviously something to decide between Wisma Putra and EC who has the responsibility for getting that information out in a timely manner. But we have seen from personal experience that a lot of embassy staff do not have information. In fact, I know personally of many embassy staff who were not able to vote because they themselves did not have the right information and didn't know what to do. Some embassies are incredibly helpful. Just like, for instance, the embassy in France, which was extremely supportive and with the logistics as well as any information that they could share, but they were very much hampered by the lack of a clear mandate and the lack of timely and updated information. I think the students were already mentioned, and we totally support the idea of voter education for students and the ideas that were proposed to give them, to make them aware before they leave and once they're there, to use the education attaches to continue to give information. But again, here, they need a mandate, clear mandate and clear instructions. Next slide, please. Yes, and of course, the big challenge that everyone's alluded to is the time frame, which is too short. So thank you very much again to the EC for trying to speed up the process as much as possible. You've seen from the videos and from what has been presented that this does represent huge costs for voters, and also it raises voter inequity because some have financial capacity to send back ballots by expensive courier services, but some don't. Some people live far from main postal distribution centers and some are close. So again, that will also influence the timing. And there has been, as mentioned, huge grassroots mobilization over the past 2 elections to collect ballots and deliver them, mobilizing huge numbers of people, both overseas and in Malaysia. And, with lots of people spending money on flying back, etc. So, but we really cannot continue relying on this. This should not be the norm. So we have to really change that, because it's not normal that, voters are spending so much time and resources, taking time off work, their personal lives to be doing this. So I think, yes, the opening registration of overseas postal voting earlier would be great, but we do understand that, you can't do it before Parliament is dissolved. But to the extent that can be done, that would be fantastic. Extending the campaign period. We know there are many challenges for this, but again, extending the campaign period would solve a lot of problems. Yes, and shortening the ballot timeline using information technology. Is this possible? We've heard recently that it's not possible. It'd be great to understand why. In addition, I didn't put this in the here, but the postal delivery, or rather delivery through courier service, if it's possible to have tracking numbers for everybody, that's incredibly helpful, because when you're dealing with a very short timeline, and if you know exactly when your postal vote is arriving, you can actually make arrangements to be there at home to receive it and send it back. So that seems like a detail, but it's actually incredibly important. And lastly, I was very glad to hear Dato' Mama Ali saying that voting in foreign missions is not the solution, because indeed we found from the survey that a very significant portion for overseas Malaysians live more than 200 kilometers from the nearest mission, and sometimes even in a different country. So voting in foreign missions is really not the most practical solution for overseas Malaysians. Then another issue that was raised in the video was the requirement to have a Malaysian witness the vote. Many Malaysians actually live in areas where there are no other Malaysians around. And with, Global Bursa's experience, we've had quite a few people contacting us looking for witnesses because they cannot get it witnessed by anybody else. So again, if there's a possibility of changing this requirement, that would also be extremely helpful. Next slide, please. Yep, and that's it. And thank you very much again for listening. And I hope that we can have a bit of a dialogue as to whether some of these challenges can be overcome.
Thank you. Yes, right within time, and a lot of things. I mean, I suddenly thought of a few things to ask, but I think I will keep that while let's listen to the rest of the presenters first. Then maybe we could have a further discussion on this issue. And it's interesting that you also agree that voting at the Malaysian embassy, so any mission rep, it would be like, an impossible thing. And again, the issue that Global Bursary has been helping out with the voting is also something we have to think about, because of course all that involves money, and I don't know whether maybe we will direct that question later to SPR, whether there are any costs included in when you're talking about postal vote, and also how to assist Malaysians abroad to make sure that they will be able to exercise their rights in terms of voting. Okay, I will move on to the next speaker. I would like to welcome Mr. Patono Samino, researcher on NetGrid Indonesia, and he will talk about best practices overseas postal voting system, and I presume it would be Indonesian examples, best practices. Silakan, please.
Okay, thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speaker and participant. I thank you very much for having me in this discussion. It is my honor that the Human Rights Commission invited me to share the experience of the Indonesian in conducting the overseas voting. So my name is Partoro Samino. You can call me Tono. I work for the NetGrid. It is a national NGO focusing on the election. But previously, I was the commissioner of Indonesian General Election Commission at DKI Jakarta Province, and I also was the expert staff for the Indonesian Election Commission at the national level for 5 years. Yes, I think I agree, with these previous speakers that the voting right is fundamental for human rights. So therefore, our government, our state must guarantee and facilitate in exercising the voting right of the citizen, regardless their religion, their race, and also where they live, whether in home country or in overseas. Ladies and gentlemen, I just read the article from International ADIA in 2020 that in 2022 there are 73% of the states already adopted the out of country voting. Out of country voting, or we call it overseas election in Indonesia. So there is a significant increase if we compare to 2007. That was only 53% from the state or countries. Can you continue my presentation, please? Yes, there is the overview that I want to talk about. The experience of Indonesian overseas election. First of all, I will introduce the overseas election in Indonesia, and then the second overseas election management committee. I will talk about the electoral management body in abroad, and then the eligible voters, And then overseas voter registration, I will talk about the mechanism in voter registration. And then overseas voters in Malaysia. I mean the Indonesian voters in Malaysia. And then overseas vote mechanism, I will explain several mechanism in overseas voting that Indonesia has experienced. And then the 7 is the type of elections, how many ballot papers voters votes in overseas election, and then counting the ballot papers, and then the challenges of postal vote, and then the last one is a lesson learned. Next, please. As you see, there is a pictures I take from the internet. The first one in the my left hand and the bottom is in Singapore, and then in the right and the upper is in Holland, in the Hague in the Netherlands, and then in the my left hand in the bottom, you may know, is in Kuala Lumpur, and then the last one in Hong Kong. It shows that the citizen of Indonesia in abroad, they very enthusiastic to to exercise their voting right in the overseas election on the voting day. So thousands of people were crowded in front of the embassy's office in the consular offices. Yeah, you can see our voters very enthusiastic to exercise their voting right. Next, please. And then Indonesian overseas voting refers to the process of election in which Indonesia voters living abroad can cast their ballot papers in respective residing country. It is conducted in all countries around the world where Indonesia has diplomatic relation. Yeah, and then the overseas election was conducted and the first time in the 1971 election. I was quite surprised because 1970 election was when the new order regime, when the Suharto president came into the power, and he already aware of the human right, especially for the voting right for Indonesian people overseas. And then we continue the implementation of overseas election until now, and we will have the 2024 overseas election in February 2024. But I have no information when a postal vote was implemented for the first time. I don't know whether in 1971 already implemented for the postal vote mechanism for the voting day. But what I heard from the executive director of Netflix, Mr. Hadar Gume, he experienced a postal voting in 1982 election when he was in the USA studying for his master degree. And then the overseas election is very important for the political development in Indonesia, such as for the inclusivity of democracy. Yeah, we can safeguard the human right, maintaining ties and connection of Indonesian citizens with their homeland when they are living abroad, and also the obligation of our government of Indonesia to fulfill the political right of its citizen. And then the last one is the overseas election is expected to raise voter turnout and political participation. Next, please. This is the management committee who is responsible to manage the overseas election. Of course, in the highest level of management body is KPU, Indonesian General Election Commission. This is the highest organization that hold the responsibility to conduct the election in home country and also in abroad. So KPU is assisted by PPLN, we call it PPLN, Overseas Voting Committee, in managing the overseas election. It is formed in every embassy and in consular office. Yeah. So KPU until now already has established 128 PPLNs, yeah, in 128 diplomatic mission office around the world. And each PPLN, each overseas voting committee consisted of 5 persons, 1 chairperson, and 5 members, and assisted by secretariat staff, usually coming from the embassy staff. And then PPLN is also assisted by Pantalih LN, Overseas Voter Registration Officer, which is responsible for developing overseas voter list. Yeah. And then also assisted by KPPSLN, Overseas Group of Voting Officers, consisted of 7 members who are responsible for voting and counting at polling day. And there are 3 types of KPPSLN, depending on the type of voting mechanism, yeah, in person, and then in mobile ballot box, or in postal vote. Next, please. And then this is the eligible overseas voter for Indonesian overseas election. First of all, they must be citizen of Indonesia, for sure. And then he or she is 70 years old on voting day, or she or he has been married. Yeah, even though she or he is not 70 years old on the voting day, as long as he or she has been married, so they are eligible voters. They are has the right to be registered and has the right to exercise their voting right. And then the third is he or she is not a police or military officer. Yeah. And then the fourth, they must prove by their passport, Indonesian passport, or a national identity card. We call it KTP electronic national identity card. And then the last, they reside overseas until at least in the voting day. So that is the eligible voters. And then this is the mechanism in voter registration in abroad. Yeah, the KPU obtains potential overseas voter data from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs 40 months before the voting day, before the 14 February of 2024. And then KPU conducted a data synchronization. Yeah, the potential overseas data from the MOFA, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they synchronize with the latest voter list in home country voter list. Yeah, and then the Pantalih Luar Negeri, or I call it the voter registration officers and abroad, they verify the data by several means. For example, by calls and by email, and then WhatsApp messages, socialization for voters, usually the PPLN, officers, they invite the representative of voters in the diplomatic mission office or another places. And then they also optimize their mass media, their what I can say, Facebook, and then Twitter, and another means, yeah, for the socialization of the voter registration. And then during the voter registration, the officers also conducted voting mechanism identification. So they identify the voters who intend to vote with postal votes, mobile ballot box, or in person. So they, I mean the PPLN, the overseas voting committee, right now they already have the voter list for each voting mechanism, yeah. And then they already publish their preliminary and permanent voter list in their website and their what I can say, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. Continue, please. And then that is the Indonesia voters in Malaysia. Yeah, in Malaysia we have 6 PPLN. Yeah, 6 overseas voting committee in Kuala Lumpur, Johor Bahru, Kinabalu, Kuching, Penang, and Tawau. And then we have 832,420 voters in Malaysia, and it is the biggest number of voters compared to the other countries. And then Kuala Lumpur contributes the biggest number of voters. It is 447,258 voters. Yeah, the total of Indonesian overseas voter is only 1,750,474 voters. It is less than 1% of the voter list in Indonesia. We have more than 204 million voters in home country. And then they already have a list of voters who intend to vote with postal vote or mobile ballot box or in person. Yeah, every PPLN in Kuala Lumpur, Johor Bahru, Kinabalu, Kuching, Penang, and the rest of the PPLN, they already the list of voters who intend to vote by postal vote, mobile ballot box, in person. Next, please. This is the mechanism of overseas voting. Yeah, we have 3 mechanisms. First is in person. Yeah, voters that have been registered in the voter list come to the overseas polling station to cast their ballot on the voting day. And then the second mechanism is postal vote, a voting mechanism in which ballot papers are distributed to the voters and casted ballot papers are returned to overseas voting committee by post. And the postal vote is given to voters who are unable to vote in person, yeah, because the geographical constraint very far from the diplomatic mission office. And then the last, the third mechanism, we have a mobile ballot box. Yeah, in previous election in 2014 election, we call it Dropbox votes. Yeah, in which voting mechanism, overseas voting committee serve group of voters who are unable to vote in person or do postal vote due to geographical and time constraints. So, and the officer reach the group of voters to their location. Next, please. in-person vote system. This is the how the our officers run the in-person vote system. First of all, they announce the date, time and location of polling station 5 days before the voting day. So the KPPSLN, the voting officers, they have to announce the day, the date, time, and location of polling station 5 days before the voting day. That is in the latest. And then they distribute the invitation letter for voting in person to all the voters at least at the latest 3 days before the voting days. Overseas voting polling station can be conducted 3 days before the voting day in Indonesia at the latest. For example, in 2024 election, we will conduct in Indonesia in 14 February. That means on Wednesday. Wednesday. So the voting day in overseas, they will conduct usually on Saturday or Sunday, on the holiday, except for the in the Middle East country. Usually they conducted a polling day on Friday. And then the location of polling station at Indonesian embassies, consular offices, Indonesian school, or other places that are given permission by the local authorities. And then the voters, each polling station is 500 the maximum. Next, please. And then this voting time started from 8 a.m. until 18 local time, until 6 p.m. So the voting will be 10 hours, and then first come first serve basis, but priority is given to voters with disabilities, pregnant voters, and elderly voters. Witnesses of political parties and candidates and overseas election supervisory committee are given access to monitor and oversee the voting process, but not allowed to wear and bring campaign attributes. And observers are allowed to observe the voting from outside of polling station and not allowed to interrupt the process of voting. Next, please.
Partono,
yes.
I think your time is actually...
Okay, continue, please. Next, please, sorry.
Maybe we could, because this is in-person vote system.
Okay.
We have done the postal one.
Okay. So continue with the postal mechanism, please.
We are more concerned.
Yes, this is the postal vote system managed by Postal Overseas Voting Committee or KPPSLN Post. Its team consists of 3 persons and that they handle 1,000 voters. And then the distribution of ballot papers to voters will be 30 days before the election day at the latest, and then voters will receive a package of containing ballot papers, C6 form, this is a notification form, an empty envelope for casted ballot papers, an envelope with address of PPLN office and the stamp. So it a little bit different with the Malaysia experience, in which the voters is responsible to the cost of returning ballot papers. In Indonesia, the our government and the KPU is responsible to the cost of returning casted ballot papers. And then there is no restrict schedule for voters to vote and send back their casted ballot papers and C6 form. They just simply send back their cast ballot papers by post. But voters are allowed to send back manually to PPLN. Next, please. Ballot papers must be received on counting days. So that is the most important. that the voters must pay attention. Yeah, their ballot papers, yeah, they must be received by the committee on the counting days, which is in 40 February in 2024 at the latest. Yeah, so voters must consider the duration in sending back their ballot papers. Casted ballot papers arrive after 14 February will not be counted and considered as valid votes. Overseas Election Supervisory Commission has the right and duty to oversee the management of postal vote. Next, please. This mobile ballot box we can skip because it's already time up. Yeah, this is on the picture of the mobile ballot box I just show you. Our officer, they reach their voters in their location. Continue, please. Next, please. What voter votes? Yeah, this is the type of election. Yeah, from 1971 to 1999 election, overseas voters only got one ballot paper, which was ballot for the national parliament for Jakarta electoral district. However, since the direct presidential and vice presidential election took place in 2004, overseas voters get two ballot papers, DPRI for Jakarta 2 and President and Vice President ballot papers. Voters do not get ballot papers for DPD, DPRD, which is the local parliament, yeah, province and district level. And also there is no overseas election on local election for governor and mayor positions, only for the national parliament and president and vice presidential election. Counting process is conducted in the voting day in Indonesia, 14 February in 2024 at the Indonesian Embassy and consular offices. And then overseas voting is expected to not influence voters in home country in casting their ballot. So why we conduct the counting process on the same day when we have a voting day in Indonesia. It is to avoid the what I can say, the influence from overseas of result. And then vote counting from the in-person postal and MBB mechanism is conducted simultaneously. Witness of political parties and cadet and overseas election supervisory committee are given access in the voting process and have the right to complain and propose correction if there is irregularities or wrongdoing. KPPSLN, yeah, fills and sign the certificate of result on C result form and provides one copy for each witness and overseas election supervisory committee. When KPPSLN finish the voting, the vote counting, they seal the certificate and result and ballot box and give it to PPLN for vote recapitulation. Next, please. This challenge, yeah, this is the picture of the voting process in Kuala Lumpur. Yeah. Next, please. The challenge of postal vote. The first one is related to the address of voters, especially invalid and unknown address. Not specific address. Many ballot papers do not reach the intended address or written to senders. And PPLN Kuala Lumpur itself, the case of the return to senders was 3,342 cases. And then also the second issue is the temporary address. Many voters, especially informal workers in Malaysia, stayed in temporary addresses. They moved to other places when the ballot papers were distributed. Yeah, so they don't get the ballot papers. And then logistics is more complex, needs extra time and staff to manage, as I mentioned before. They have to distribute the ballot papers 30 days before the voting days, and then the staff is 3% for 1,000 voters. And then rampant for election fraud, especially voter rigging, voter fraud, and the double voting by postal and in-person voting. As I can give you an example, in 2019 election in Kuala Lumpur, the postal votes is repeat because there is a voter fraud in Kuala Lumpur in 2019. Around 200,000 voters had to have voting post again because the voter fraud. Next, please. And then very high cost compared to other system. It is the most expensive and burden state budget a lot. And then also low turnout, because of the several reasons that I mentioned before. The address is not valid, not complete, the temporary address, and the return to senders. And then less preferred by voters. I just have a discussion with the former chairperson of KPU last Friday. He said that the postal vote mechanism is less preferred by voters. Voters tend to vote in person at polling station or at mobile box ballots. And then high invalid votes also occur due to lack of information. And then it is difficult, if not impossible, to be monitored and to control and supervised by the election supervisory committee. Next, please. And then lesson learned. There are several lessons learned that I want to share to you all. Indonesia overseas voting has secured the voting right of Indonesian voters abroad. It has increased the voters' turnout and political participation, as well as increased Indonesia voter nationalism when they are abroad. Overseas voter turnout is always below 40%, and needs more effort to boost the voter turnout in the next election. From the 3 available vote mechanism, the MBB, the mobile ballot box, is the most favorite system, followed by in-person, and the least favorite is postal vote. Because of its risk, postal vote system need to be evaluated, its effectiveness and efficiency, as well as its integrity. And then postal vote may fit to some condition, but does not fit to some conditions. The country, our government should seek other vote systems that are more feasible, less costly, but not threatening election integrity. To me, electronic internet voting can be feasible choice in overseas election, but it needs thorough study and tailored test. Next, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak.
I give it back to you. Thank you.
I think we're running a little bit late on your paper, but now I would like to call upon.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Robert Peranan, former Chief Electoral Officer and Chief Executive of New Zealand Electoral Commission, to share some of best practices. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings to you all. Thank you, Suhakam, for this opportunity to participate in this webinar. And thank you, Professor Muhammad Ali, for your words of welcome. I promise I can be relatively brief. New Zealand's system is relatively simple. At our very recent 2023 general election, 78,000 New Zealanders voted from overseas. While we don't yet have the official statistics on this, we can safely predict that the large majority of these voters did so by uploading their voting papers through a secure website maintained by the New Zealand Electoral Commission for this purpose. Most of the rest will have voted in person at one of the 74 overseas voting places available around the world. A few may have returned their voting papers by fax. The regulations also allow for overseas voters who are blind or vision impaired to vote by dictation. Virtually, given the other channels available, virtually no one will have voted by post, although that is an available option. Overseas voting was available for the 17 days before election day, and for those voting by fax or upload, they were able to return their voting papers up until the close of polling, that is 7 p.m. on election day in New Zealand. So over the next few minutes, I will try to summarise how we have got to where we are in New Zealand. I'll briefly outline who can vote from overseas, the development of different overseas voting methods in New Zealand, and how we maintain accessibility and integrity in our voting system. First, who can vote? At the 2023 election, registered electors who were citizens were eligible to vote so long as they had returned to New Zealand sometime in the last 6 years. Registered electors who were residents entitled to remain in New Zealand indefinitely were eligible so long as they had returned to New Zealand within the last 4 years. New Zealanders have long been able to vote from overseas for parliamentary elections, at least since World War I. But the ways that they have been able to vote have changed over time. Up until the 1990s, they could vote in person at overseas voting places or by postal vote. Overseas voting places are usually New Zealand diplomatic posts, but they can also be venues like the Australian, for example, the Australian state and federal electoral commissions. In the 1990s, voting by fax was added to the channels available for the small number of overseas voters whose special circumstances made it particularly difficult for them to vote. In 2002, fax voting was made available for all overseas voters. They could receive their voting papers via email, by post, or at an overseas voting place, and return it by post or by fax. In 2008, overseas voters were able to download their voting papers from a secure website, print them, complete them, and return them by post or by fax. At the 2008 election, 75% of overseas voters used the download system to obtain their voting papers. From its introduction in 2002 until 2014, fax voting was the predominant way for New Zealanders to return their overseas votes. For example, in 2008, 53% of overseas votes were returned by fax, 37% at overseas voting places, and only 10% by post. However, by 2011, it was clear that fax machines were becoming yesterday's technology. So at the 2014 election, overseas voters were, for the first time, able to not only download their voting papers from a secure website, they were also able to upload their completed papers. 56% of voters used the upload system in 2014. 33% voted at an overseas post, 6% faxed their papers back still, and only 5% posted them 67% of overseas voters used the upload system to return their papers in 2017, and 94% did in 2020. Although we should note that the 2020 election was, of course, affected by COVID-19 restrictions. So very few voters were able to vote at overseas voting places, and that will have amplified that figure somewhat. But the key message from this, though, is that virtually no one returns their votes by post these days. This is because it is simply too difficult and expensive with today's international postal vote services, international postal services, to return them within the deadlines required for overseas voting. Now, how, I hear you ask, do we maintain the integrity of elections when people are able to vote from overseas using these methods? New Zealand's electoral law has for a very long time provided for a system of voting we call special voting, and overseas voting is a subset of that system. A voter voting in New Zealand can vote at any voting place in the country during advance voting or on election day. We have 12 days of advance voting in New Zealand. If they are voting in their electorate and they're on the printed roll, they make what we call an ordinary vote. They receive their paper, they complete it in the polling place, and they put it in a ballot box in the polling place. Simple. If they're not on the printed roll, or they are voting outside their electorate, they must first complete a special declaration asserting their eligibility to vote, and that declaration must be witnessed. Now, their witness declaration, is then inserted in one pocket of a two-pocket envelope. The voters then issued their ballot paper, they complete their ballot paper, and they seal it. They seal it inside the other pocket of the envelope. There were 600,000 special votes cast at the 2023 election, or 20.9% of all votes cast. As I said at the outset, of these special votes, there were 78,000 votes cast from overseas, which was 12.9% of all special votes and 2.7% of all votes cast at the 2023 election. Now, special votes are not counted on election night in New Zealand. The election night count is only a preliminary count of ordinary votes. After election night, there is the official count. In New Zealand, the preliminary and official counts are conducted by hand. Before the official count can be completed, each special vote declaration is checked. So, taken out of the envelope and checked to ensure the voter is eligible to vote. The ballot paper stays sealed in the envelope while this is happening. If eligible, the voter's declaration is filed. So it's just put to once, it's filed separately, and their ballot paper, still sealed in the envelope, is admitted to the official count, thereby preserving the secrecy of the ballot. If they're not eligible, their vote is excluded from the count. It's put to one side. All roles, electoral rolls used to issue ordinary votes and all records of special votes issued are checked to see if anyone has voted more than once. The ballot papers of apparent dual voters are excluded from the official count. Only then is the official count completed and declared. Since the 2020 election, this has been on the 20th day after election day. Now, overseas votes returned by upload or by fax are received in a secure facility maintained by the Electoral Commission. Electoral Commission officials print out for each voter their declaration and ballot paper, and they seal them inside an envelope like this in the respective pockets of each of such an envelope, and then they forward it to the voter's returning officer, where it is processed like all other special votes. So in conclusion, New Zealand's system of special voting makes participation in parliamentary elections more accessible. Our download and upload system has made overseas voting more accessible, particularly in a world where postal services are disappearing. Now, I'm conscious that I've just tried to download a great deal of information in a very short time. I don't know if any of you have been able to upload any of it, but I would be very happy to try and answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting sharing from New Zealand and also just now from Indonesia. I think now we have about 20 minutes or for half an hour. We're going to open it for question and answer. And we have actually been receiving quite a number of questions in our Q&A box. And we are going to put it up on the screen, questions, and I probably would ask each one of you to answer in relation to what has been asked. Okay, can we have that? Yeah. It's not out yet. I think among the question before we were able to share the screens. Okay, there's a question from Lee. Yeah, since the postal votes are delivered via courier, where can voters get the courier tracking number to trace the ballots? And she also asked, this is for I think SPR. Many PTH voters did not change their status after they returned to Malaysia. I would like to understand what is the process to do so. Maybe let's SPR answer those two questions. The first one is they have not changed their status, and what is the process of changing their status? And secondly, if postal votes are delivered via courier, where can voters get the tracking numbers? And the other question for SPR, I think you have quite a big number of questions. Adakah perlu mohon My SPR bagi kategori B1 setiap kali berlakunya pilihan raya? Do you need to apply to My SPR when you are in the B1 category every time we're going to have election? And atau konsep hanya mohon sekali, or is it just that you have to apply once under PTH? And then Global Bersih does a lot for mobilization of B1 voters category, but there is a lack of mobilization for PTH. How are PTH voters mobilized and informed about the need to register as PTH? Are they a part of the online registration system? And again, for SPR, electronic-based votings, Does SPR have any plans to include electronic elements in overseas postal voting? And number two, there are discussions on the need to move towards a more electronic-based voting system. Is there a recommendation of introducing printable PDF ballots to navigate a short campaign period? Of course, it can only work with proper pilot program and voters education. How can SPR on this idea? And what can overseas voters expect in terms of improvements of general election 16 in 2027? And also, this is a recommendation to SPR that students, semua pelajar sebelum dihantar ke luar negara oleh agensi kerajaan dicadangkan sesi penerangan oleh SPR. Okay, can I hand over to Zoe, Puan Zoe, to answer?
Okay, thank you very much. There are a lot of questions, and good that there's a good opportunity for SPR to provide some clarity. So first of all, on the tracking numbers, I'll do that first. Basically, the tracking numbers are dependent on the respective couriers. So some international couriers do provide tracking numbers to overseas voters, I believe. Some don't. But if what SPR proactively does is we have a 24-hour call center for postal voters to call, and they can get an update on their status of their postal vote through this call center, which is, I say, 24 hours, so that anyone overseas, obviously the time difference, it should make it a lot easier for them. And this is throughout the entire election period that this runs, specifically to get information on your ballot. On the process for PTH to change their status, this can be done through your My SPR account. So if you don't have a My SPR account yet, I again encourage all voters to open a My SPR account now, if possible. And then you can basically conduct any transactions you need with SPR through this account, because it is a secure system. If you want to change your status from PTH to a normal voter, you can do that through the My SPR account. You need to fill out Form A, to update your status. However, you have to do this before the dissolution of Parliament, okay? Because you cannot change your status on the electoral roll after the dissolution of Parliament. So please be aware, if you are registered as a PTH voter and Parliament or the State Legislative Assembly is dissolved, you cannot then change your status. This is to ensure that there is transparency and scrutiny of the electoral roll before the voting process. We need to allow political parties and stakeholders to scrutinize the electoral roll in order to make sure that it's clean and transparent. So no voter is allowed to change their status on the electoral roll after dissolution. Okay. Question number 3. So 1B voters, yes, you need to apply every election. If you are not PTH, so again, I really encourage all overseas Malaysians to make sure they know if they are PTH voters or 1B voters, okay? If you applied as a 1B voter before, you have to apply to be a 1B voter again every election. This basically ensures that you have a choice. If you have returned to Malaysia between elections and you have not yet updated your status as a PTH voter, for example, as 1B, you can choose to go to your polling station and still vote, or you have a choice to apply to be a postal voter if you are still overseas. It also makes sure that your correspondence address is up to date. So a lot of the problems with PTH voters is that they apply once, maybe when they first went overseas as a student 10 years ago, they use their student accommodation that they lived in 10 years ago. They come back to Malaysia. SPR doesn't know their current contact details. So we have to send a ballot paper to their student accommodation that they once lived at 10 years ago. So actually the 1B process has a lot more benefits in order to ensure that the ballot actually reaches you at your latest address, because you have only just provided us with that address within the last few weeks. So you are definitely at that address. That's where you want your ballot to go to. So yes, you need to apply. But again, I say if you open your My SPR account now, it is only a 5-minute process to do the second step of filling out the Form 1B. Number 4, about, I think this was Nirmala's question. Yes, about mobilization for PTH. Honestly, as I've laid out all of the issues with PTH voters, I don't think SPR necessarily wants people to be mobilized to register as a PTH voter because they have the option of being a 1B voter. It is far more accurate and safe to apply once the election has been called or when the election is near as a 1B voter. That means that you apply for that election. We have the information that we need to make sure that your ballot is going to the location you currently are. So we generally don't want to mobilize for people to be PTH voters. For example, if they're going overseas and now the election is only due in 2027, they might already have come back by the time the election is called. So if they register as a PTH voter and then they come back, but they don't update their status, that means that the ballot will be sent overseas. So it is far more practical for SPR to only mobilize people to be 1B voters, right? And to raise awareness on the status of 1B. In terms of electronic-based voting methods, I really appreciate Robert's very clear explanation on what New Zealand does, but at the same time, I think that we all acknowledge that different systems work for different countries, different cultures, different expectations. So in Malaysia, I think we've put a lot of focus on the security of our system due to the different levels of, say, public trust in the elections and the election process. Also, we tend to put a lot of emphasis on the idea of scrutinizing of our elections and transparency in terms of political parties being able to actually see and understand the process, to ensure that there is confidence in and trust in the process. This isn't to say that there's a lack of integrity in the sort of e-voting systems. It's just ensuring that there is proper understanding and trust in the system. And my view is at the moment, we are not there yet. So if we can improve public trust, if we are able to show that there is a 100% foolproof system for using e-voting, then maybe in the future SPR would be open to it, but not at this current time. We don't believe that the benefits of an e-voting system outweigh the disadvantages of the integrity of the election process as a whole. When it comes to PDF ballots as well, I want to just mention one thing about the security of our ballot papers. SPR puts a lot of effort into making sure that our ballot papers have a lot of security features in them. So if we start to open up loopholes where some people don't have these secure ballots and other people do have these secure ballots, basically the security of the whole system is lost. So we would be very reluctant to try to lose our strong security systems that we have in our current voting process. In terms of, I'll put 6 and 7 together. I'm sorry, I know I'm taking a while, but I want to try to really make the most of this opportunity. For students before they go overseas to get an explanation, and also what voters can expect in terms of in 2027, because SPR is always trying to improve our processes, we're always trying to find solutions for the various issues that are coming up. We may change processes here and there before it comes to 2027. So if we were to give a briefing now to students going overseas, one, they might not even have a chance to vote when they're overseas because an election might not be called in that time frame. And 2, we might have changed the system. So then they would be confused if we've made changes to our processes. If we give them a briefing maybe 2 years before that, and then we make a number of changes to that system, when it comes for them to vote, if they rely on that outdated information, it's not necessarily the best idea. So I think that answers all the questions. If you have any more, please, I'm happy to answer any more.
Just one more. Can PTH voter applies to change to IB and vice versa?
To 1B. Yes, so basically what PTH voters have to do if they want to be 1B voters is they have to update their status to be ordinary voters first. So they need to fill out Form A first before dissolution of Parliament. And then once an election is called, they can apply to be a 1B voter. But a PTH voter, if during the election period, if they are a PTH voter and they fill out 1B, they will not be accepted as a 1B voter because they are automatically sent a ballot paper as an absentee voter. And SPR can't change that status on the electoral roll after dissolution. Thank
you. Thank you very much. Now, these questions and feedbacks is to Global Bersih. This person is saying, saya cadangkan untuk include sekali permasalahan human error dalam pengendalian undi pos oleh pihak SPR. Ada beberapa masalah berpunca daripada kesilapan pengendalian SPR antaranya. He's talking about human error and mistakes being done by SPR. Nombor satu, tidak ada alamat RO yang ditampal, dicop di sampul B. There is no RO chopped, recognition in the B envelope. And then salah alamat penghantaran apabila wujud nama yang sama, wrong address being used for the same names and then wrong address, and then salah nombor siri ballot yang ditulis di borang saksi, dan yang akhir sekali tiada sampul A untuk masuk semula ballot yang telah dipangkah. Global Bersih would like to react to this.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a question from Difan. Thanks for that question. Well, it's not a question actually. It's a kind of statement.
And some allegations.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have also noticed these errors in sort of various ballot collection exercises across the country, different countries. So yeah, I can only agree that that has also been a problem that we have noticed. So maybe actually it's for SPR again, this...
Would you like to react to that, Puan Zo?
Sure, no problem. Obviously, there are human errors, and it is as frustrating for SPR as it is for any other party, I think, when we put a lot of effort into trying to make sure that we send postal ballots out. I mean, we have a lot of human resources at our HQ really trying to make sure we get these ballots out. Unfortunately, there are cases of human errors, and as much as we will try to limit them, they will still exist. For number 3, however, I know that there was a lot of confusion during GE15 and in elections before and after as well about mistakes on your borong dua, on the declaration of identity form. If there are mistakes on that form, the voters are free to change those details. So if the wrong name is on your borong dua, you can cross that name out and write your own name. If it's the wrong serial number, you can cross out that serial number and write your own serial number, as long as the information there matches the information of the serial number on your sample and your kertas undi on your ballot paper. Okay. And also I do really encourage overseas voters. So if these errors occur, please let SPR know so that we know that these are errors and the extent of these errors, so we can identify solutions for future elections. Because some of these cases maybe we weren't aware of. So if you can make us aware, I know that it's too late for those voters, but in the future, at least we can try to solve these problems going forward. Thank you.
Just, of late, I think some of the majorities are very slim. Very, I think our previous 15 general election, the majority vote is like, I think the smallest was 12, if I'm not mistaken. 12 majority is against the other party. Now, it would be interesting that if there is an overseas voters and he wanted to vote, he did receive his ballot letters and all that, but in the end he was not able to vote because it was a mistake of SPR. It would be it's a good mood question, but had they gone to court and actually say that, I could have voted, I could have made that difference, and that would be something, it would be an interesting thing, because I think so far no one actually, maybe Global Bersih want to say. A lot of people, when they receive wrong envelopes and wrong names and all that, they just chucked it into the dustbin. It is important, I think, for you to write back and actually tell that I could have voted, but and my candidate could have won if many of us were able to vote. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you want to react to my question in that respect?
Sure. If first of all, I think that it's not just if it could have affected the election result. I think first and foremost, it is about ensuring that everyone has the right to vote, whether the election was won by 50,000 votes or by 1 vote. I think each voter will be equally as frustrated not being able to exercise that right. So in that case, I think that to make sure that we can all improve, to make sure that all of our weaknesses and our challenges are overcome. As I said, please let SPR know. Or NGOs can, honestly, Global Bersih really is unrelenting in their efforts to improve the postal voting system for overseas Malaysians. So even if you don't let SPR know, you can let your embassy know, or even NGOs know, so that at least we can understand the extent of the issue from our side to respond to the problems. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. This is the question for Pak Tono. You mentioned overseas voters turnout is always below 40% in Indonesia, and that more effort is needed to boost turnout. What efforts do you think that can be taken to boost this voter turnout?
Thank you for the question. I think we can boost the voter participation or voter turnout in several ways. Number one, I think the problem of the voter list in overseas is the duplication. Yeah, so many voters registered more than once. So first of all, I think we have to have like data cleansing. We have to clean the voter list from the duplicates, so that we can have like the higher voter turnout after we cleanse out the voter list data. And then the second, I think socialization of voter information must be conducted more and more in the foreign countries, because I think it's because of the budget, provided by the Indonesian government to the overseas committee to conduct the voter information socialization. Yeah, I think it is also important. And then the third, what I mentioned in the my last presentation, I think we should try to find another means for the voting mechanism that can reach Indonesian voters living very remote area. For example, in Malaysia, that they work in the perkebunan, palm oil perkebunan. It's difficult to reach by postal mechanism, to reach by to get to the embassy and another diplomatic mission office. So I think what Mr. Peden said, like fax mechanism can be try in my country. Thank you.
Thank you. This is same question, number 10. Yeah, okay, that's all right. Now this one is another question. I think with SPR regarding the wrong information. We encourage polling agents and counting agents to reject the ballots. So SPR reaction to this, you just now say that wrong information, you just cancel it and do your own amendments, but this could, the ballot might be rejected.
The decision to reject ballot is dependent on the decision of the returning officer, or in some cases, the assistant returning officer. So it is not, while the agents of candidates can object to or raise concerns with the borong dua, it is completely up to the returning officer. They have final say, and SPR encourages returning officers not to basically be too nitpicky or too pedantic in choosing whether in rejecting these borong dua. So basically, if a voter has corrected the information, to make sure it is correct. If the information was wrong and they have corrected it to make sure the information is correct, the returning officer, the advice SPR gives to the returning officer, and in his discretion or her discretion, they may choose to reject it or accept it. But the advice given by SPR is to accept all borong dua that has the correct information on it by voters. So while candidate agents may want to object, it is up to the returning officers to make that decision. And we encourage to ensure that the right to vote is paramount and comes first, that they don't reject these borong dua. Okay?
Thank you. Pak Paterno, another question. You mentioned
Yes.
that postal voting is offered to voters who are unable to vote in person. Is it offered to local voters too? And if yes, what is the criteria to enable to vote by post within your country?
Thank you for the question. The postal mechanism is only applied in the overseas election. We don't have any another mechanism except for in person in Indonesia. So it is not applied for the local voters. Thank you.
So it's not exercised. I mean, local have to vote in person. Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Only
Mr.
one way in Indonesia. In
Okay.
local, in person, only in person.
Robert, this is a question for you. During your time as Chief Electoral Officer, do you recall seeing a lot of votes of apparent dual voters whose votes are excluded from the official count?
I'm thinking back 7 years since I last had anything to do with running parliamentary elections. So I don't recall the number for the 2014 election, but I can tell you that for the 2020 election, it was 48 people who were. Well, I need to make a distinction. When we are scrutinizing the roll to see if a voter has voted more than once, if during the period of the official count we are unable to determine whether a voter voted, had one vote that was legitimate and the other record was as a result of, for example, official error, or was somebody else voting wrongly under that person's name. If we're unable to be sure, we are required to exclude both votes. If we can be sure that the person voted only once, that vote will be admitted into the count, and any other vote that's been recorded against that voter will be disallowed. We also find that we have a situation in New Zealand where we have issuing officers go to rest homes, to old people's homes, to issue votes. And it sometimes happens that the voter will vote when the issuing officer is there, and then their family will come a couple of days later and ask them if they want to go out to vote, and they will have forgotten that they have voted, and they'll go and vote again. Unfortunately, in that circumstance, both their votes get disallowed. But of course, in New Zealand, it's a corrupt practice to vote more than once. So we make a judgment. If our conclusion is that the dual voting was inadvertent, we take the votes away, we exclude the votes, but we don't refer those people to the police. Where, however, we think that the dual voting was deliberate, then we refer the matter to the police. And in 2020, 48 people were referred to the police for voting more than once.
Okay. One more question, sir, but from your experience with international best practices, what recommendations or steps would you suggest Malaysia to take to improve the participation rate of overseas voters through postal ballots while ensuring integrity in electoral processes?
Well, I listened very carefully to Zoe's response to the appropriateness. You know, I absolutely agree with what Zoe said about having to take account of the particular circumstances of country in deciding what kind of processes are appropriate. One thing I would say in relation to New Zealand's experience, and it may be we're a long way away from anywhere. New Zealand is right at the bottom of the globe, and Malaysia is in the center of things. So maybe you have better access to international postal services than New Zealand does. But our experience is that trying to use the postal system to issue and return votes in any kind of timely way is very difficult. The download and upload system that we use, the other thing that I would say is that New Zealand also has very little, New Zealand electoral officials and New Zealand politicians have little appetite at this point for online voting. We too are concerned about the security risks. The download and upload system, however, is quite a hybrid. So a voter is able to download their declaration and their voting paper from a secure website. For the 2020 election, what used to have to happen was that you would print them. You were required to print them and complete them manually, and then you could upload them. So really, we were using the website as like the postal system, as a way of conveying your completed papers to the Electoral Commission. They're then printed and they're turned into, they're no longer in electronic form. They're printed and they're put into the same system that's used for processing all special votes. It's a hands-on process which is able to be very easily understood and monitored. For the 2020 election, for the first time, because it's actually quite difficult if you're overseas to get access to a printer, we have the regulations now enable people to be able to use an electronic signature and to complete the whole process on their laptop, including the marking of the declaration. But at the end of the process, it's still printed and goes through the same process as every other special vote. I suppose my final comment in relation to that is I think that New Zealanders have demonstrated what their preferences are. They've kind of voted with their feet in terms of what they find the most convenient way for them to vote from overseas. And that's because, you know, from their perspective, they are compromising the secrecy of their ballot. You know, they understand that when they upload their voting papers, it's going to be printed by an electoral official, albeit in a secure environment. But they're prepared to accept that because of the convenience of being able to participate. And I suppose the other thing I would emphasize is that those sites are secure. So only authorised persons are able to be present, and the officials that are working in those in that facility they take an oath or affirm that they will protect the secrecy of the vote, and are obviously subject to very severe criminal consequences if they break that oath or affirmation.
All right, thank you. Another question for Zoe. May I know the challenges that SPR faced in considering expanding the postal vote or any other special voting system, such as advanced or in New Zealand, to Sabahan or Sarawakian working in Peninsula, considering that Malaysia is and also Malaysian in Singapore can also vote through a postal vote. So arguably travel between Peninsula to Singapore, which is in fact much nearer than when you have to travel from Sabah from KL to Sabah or Sarawak. So what is your view on that? And the other one is that the need for Malaysian, can we do away with this Malaysian witness on Borang too? Because this is always a problem for overseas voters, in Malaysian overseas voters.
Sure. Okay, thanks for the question. First, I'll differentiate between the voters in Singapore and the voters from Sabah Sarawak that live in Semenanjung or vice versa. So the difference for Singaporeans is they do not have an option to change their voting address to vote in, say, Singapore, for example, right? They don't have an option to have a polling station within 2 kilometers of where they currently are, right? Because they are overseas. The difference for Sabahans and Sarawakians living in Semenanjung, for example, they have an option to update their voting address. They can change their voting address if they're a student in, say, UM, they can change their voting address to be in their accommodation now. And especially since automatic voter registration came in place, the process is very, very quick. It used to take 4 to 6 months to update your voting address. Now it is within 1 month, a voter can change their voting address. So, and it's done you can do that online. So that process is much simpler. So Sabahans and Sarawakians can change their voting address to vote within 1 kilometer of their current location. Whereas, say, Singaporeans, they don't have the option to change their voting address to be to overseas. So that's why Sabahans and Sarawakians still can vote where they live. Singaporeans can't. In terms of the challenges we face, one of the biggest challenges is that I think we've seen in all the presentations by Global Bursa how challenging the postal voting system is. There are a lot of difficulties, and we have to try to limit the number of people that vote through this special system to ensure the integrity of the electoral system as a whole. If we open it up to be honest, to everyone who is out of region, so even, say, people from Terengganu, Kelantan who live in Johor, it's also equally as far. So if they were able to vote out of region, for example, it basically changes it from a system of, right now we have, say, 50,000 overseas voters to millions of postal voters. And I think anyone who's actually been there, seeing how postal votes are counted, issued, the forms are prepared, it is a very taxing process. It takes a lot, even now, the numbers that we deal with now, and the categories we have, a high proportion of our resources before nomination day go towards the preparation of these ballot papers. So in order to expand it, it would end up jeopardizing the integrity of the entire election process if we were to expand it without the necessary resources and safeguards. So SPR really needs to balance the issues of accessibility with the issues of ensuring the integrity of the election process. And we do try to make sure we balance it. And we understand that there are improvements that can be made in certain areas, but we really need to bear that in mind. When it comes to the Malaysian witness, and I know that this has been raised a number of times, and we have looked into this, the biggest issue is if there is an election petition, like the example you gave, if there was a majority of 3 in an election, and there were 3 postal voters that their identities were disputed, and we did not have a Malaysian witness, it would make it very difficult for the enforcement agencies to track a non-Malaysian witness down and to compel them to give evidence in court. Whereas a Malaysian witness, we have their IC number, we have their registered address in Malaysia. The foreign ministry is more likely to be able to contact these witnesses. So in terms of ensuring that we are able to prove the identities of Malaysian voters, we tend to prefer a Malaysian witness. And that's why we currently still have that as a requirement. Yeah.
Thank you. One last question. This is for Global Bersih. There is a discussion about why should overseas Malaysians who are not living in the country should be allowed to vote and have a say in what happens in the country. What is Global Bersih's opinion on this?
Yeah, as I said in my presentation, I think overseas Malaysians are Malaysians like anybody else. The citizens, they just happen to be living outside, so they have as much right as anyone else. And also, I think I tried to point out that overseas Malaysians are actually very engaged and care actually about what happens to Malaysia, and also can contribute a lot to Malaysia and do contribute a lot through remittances, as mentioned, investments, political ties, and also the question of trying to get Malaysians to go home, right? If you don't engage them, then, you know, they lose touch with the country and they feel less like going home. So there are lots of reasons why Malaysians overseas should be allowed to vote as easily as possible. Thanks.
Right. Thank you very much. I think we just managed to finish on time, I think, for the first time. I would like, of course, to thank, on behalf of Suhakam, thank all the speakers, Divin Yong, Puan Zoe. I mean, you have a lot of questions to answer, Mr. Robert Pedant, Mr. Pak Patono, and also Kementerian, our Deputy Secretary. I know he's not here, but at least he had answered a couple of questions before he left for his meeting. Now, of course, I also would like to thank all the participants and all the questions that have been asked in this webinar. So we look forward to have more discussions, and we hope some of the suggestion made being taken up by SPR, and we hope, you know, Suhakam would pay you a little visit later on, maybe, and discuss ways in which we could improve this postal voting for Malaysians abroad. So thank you very much for that, and we say goodbye here, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody. Bye.